Did you know that right now you are likely less than a few miles away from an extremely polluted location or waterway? Well, it's true, and that is our unfortunate reality. Today, in this EJS 301 multimodal presentation, I will be talking about pollution, a crucial issue throughout the United States. So first off, my name is Joey Belmonte, and I'm a senior political science and history major at Miami. I chose to talk about the rising issue of pollution across our country, and I chose this because I've always been very interested in the Environmental Protection Agency and maybe hope to work for them one day. Pollution and the politics surrounding it is something that I feel is crucial to our generation, as we will most heavily feel its effects. So a little bit of background. Throughout the U.S., there are hundreds of heavily polluted locations, most of which are in the backyards of our towns and neighborhoods. According to the report to congressional requesters on the EPA improving its management of alternatives to sites on the priorities list, there were 1,329 Superfund sites on the list and 450,000 sites on the Brownfield list. Superfund sites fall under the environmental program created to address abandoned hazardous waste sites by the EPA. Brownfields, on the other hand, are potentially polluted sites formerly used by commercial or industrial businesses. According to Ricardo Rubio's Carcinogenic Air Pollution Across the United States Southern Border, the most common sites on the list are manufacturing facilities, processing plants, landfills, and mining sites. These industries tend to have the most hazardous byproducts and chemical processes, and if strict disposal and containment procedures aren't followed, it is quite easy for sites to become heavily polluted. This then means that harmful, typically cancer-causing chemicals and waste products have leaked into the soil in or around facilities, and potentially then into groundwater. For brownfields, former gas stations, dry cleaning businesses, metal plating facilities, factories, and landfills are among the locations on the list. These industries are also home to many hazardous byproducts that can easily leach into the earth. This doesn't only affect humans either, and can have a profound impact on local wildlife and environments. In the 1970s, toxic waste dumps became quite popular, so many of these sites also make up for a large amount of the Superfund priority list. This list is meant to contain the most severe and threatening to life pollution, for which a high focus is delegated to get it cleaned up. So what exactly is the EPA? According to the Origin and History section on the EPA website, they are a federal agency responsible for protecting both human health and the environment through physical action and legislature. Established in 1970 under President Nixon in response to growing concerns over pollution, the EPA has made a tremendous impact over the years, with the Superfund program itself being established in the late 80s. According to This Is a Superfund, a community guide to EPA's Superfund program, the government spending report, they received $8.5 billion in resources for Superfund site cleanups in the fiscal year 2023. Much of this funding comes from taxes on petroleum and chemical industries, who are among the most common responsible parties for pollution. The idea of the program is to clean it up with their money and then make them pay fines as well. Sites themselves can be discovered through citizens, state agencies, or regional EPA offices conducting tests. Once discovered, these sites are entered into a management system which helps to organize them by potential hazardous substances being released. Then, a site will be scored by evaluating 4 different pathways by which contaminants can spread to humans and surrounding environments. Based on this score, the EPA can decide on where the site ranks in their priority list of cleanup locations. So some operational issues with the EPA. First, the EPA and its Superfund program have been plagued by several different issues since their inception. One of these first problems would be highlighted by the Office of the Inspector General in their report, EPA could improve its redistribution of Superfund payments. Within, it is discussed how some more serious sites do not receive funding before others, bringing about questions pertaining to their ranking system. If the system is inaccurate in assessing the risk applications and pollution is not being contained, that is a massive issue and a failure of the organization's mission. Coincided with this are lengthy cleanup times, wherein sites don't see activity for years, maybe even decades. While they may not be high on the priority list, there are still chemicals and byproducts creating a harmful environment, and it is important that they are all cleaned up in a timely fashion. With administrative blockades, lawsuits, and company owners and stakeholders fighting back against cost accountability, it is easy for the organization to become inefficient. Many times, the extent of liability for the contamination is one of the main causes behind the timeline taking so long. Despite this, though, it should be noted that government organizations and programs such as these tend to have problems of this sort considering their scale of operation. Moving to some possible solutions. One of the largest issues is funding, and along with this, the distribution of funds. The EPA should assess the system they use to grade the sites first and ensure that it is still relevant to today's level of polluted sites. Next, the authority to issue cleanup orders is very important. This right was reaffirmed by the General Electric Company v. Jackson case, wherein it was decided that these orders can only be reviewable under the threat of penalty. Essentially, this means that it is in a company's or individual's best interest to comply the first time, as requesting a review will come along with penalties in most cases. When the EPA has cited you, it is highly likely that you are responsible. Despite this, corporations tend to use legal tactics to prolong the process over a number of years. This brings us to another solution, the expansion of funding. We have trillions of dollars in our defense budget, yet only the Superfund program with collected gas and chemical company taxes is funded. While this is great, we could use some of those funds in the defense budget to expand the EPA to be able to actually suit our cleanup needs. This can range from more agents, more funding for cleanups, technology improvements, etc. While defense is important, our only environment should be of far greater concern. The EPA can also make more alternatives to the priority list. This can include state programs or the utilization of private firms for cleanups, although this could become murky. Finally, greater enforcement and reporting is needed. The EPA has the ability to levy heavy fines and penalties, yet tends to only do so when it really has to. If they are more aggressive in their enforcement of regulations, we could avoid more Superfund sites in the future and begin to make a larger dent in the pollution in our country. So what can we do? It is crucial to note that we have a big difference in the cleanup of these sites and the organization of the EPA. We can make ourselves heard through the voting booth in both state and federal elections, where we can garner better representation of EPA issues through candidates. Many times we are completely oblivious to these problems around us until they affect us personally. Instead, we should take a proactive approach to cleaning up pollution, as it is our generations and the ones to come that will likely face the largest repercussions in terms of health issues. With this, I hope that you all learned something new today, and remember, our representation starts at the booth. And here's my works cited.